Judaism doesn't have a rich democratic tradition, but Judaism does have a rich political tradition. And in our current political morass, I hope that it will be helpful and illuminating to some aspects of what we are currently encountering, to take a look at how our wisdom tradition understood the different roles of the different branches of ancient Israelite government. The very first explicit law that we have about involving a king in the judicial process is in the Mishnah. And it is explicit and it is transparent. The king does not judge, and others do not judge him. He doesn't testify, and others do not testify about him. So in the Mishnah, in the earliest legal writings of our tradition, such a law suggests that the king is above the jurisdiction or beyond the jurisdiction of the human court. But what we find out in the Talmud is that this law itself was written under duress from the king. And when the rabbis had the opportunity to amend the law, they did so. But in the way that the rabbis of the later works never come out and say that the former law was wrong altogether, what the later rabbis generally do is to say that law is true, but only in a particular situation, or in this case, with kings of Israel. But the kings of the house of David, they do judge and they are judged. In other words, for the Talmud, kings are not above the law. Once we leave the Talmud, we have the codification of the Talmudic laws about who really is in charge in this Israelite monarchy or in the Jewish monarchy. And it becomes clear where the power, where the authority truly lies. For purposes of perception, the king is in charge. He gets a haircut every day. He grooms himself. He gets to sit on his throne with his crown. He gets to summons people whenever he wishes. But he doesn't get to summons the high priest. The high priest doesn't appear before the king unless the high priest wants to. And when he arrives in the throne room, the high priest does not stand before the king. The king stands before the high priest. What we know and what the king knows is that the king must give honor to Talmidei Chachamim, to the students of the court, as well as the high priest. When the Sanhedrin and the sages of Israel enter, the king has to stand up for them. The Talmud and then the subsequent legal codes, which is what we're reading here from Maimonides, goes on to say that that's only the case in private, that the king should maintain his honor and project a sense of awe to the people. So when he is in public, he doesn't need to stand, but the king needs to know, and the king needs to act in private in a way that shows his ultimate deference to the Sanhedrin and to the sages. When we get to the specific restrictions, they are found in the Torah itself, and they're further explicated in the tradition, in the oral Torah that we find in the Talmud. He must not have many wives, according to the Torah. The Talmud nails that down to 18. And then it goes on to say, and if he has one more than 18, he receives lashes. The king receives lashes. He can't have many horses. What does that mean? The Talmud explains he can only have as many horses as he needs for his military chariots. If he has even one more to trot before him, as we're about to see in the Purim story, where other kings had horses go before the kings, he is given lashes. And finally, he can't amass wealth. He can only have enough wealth that he needs in order to conduct the affairs of state. But he can't amass wealth in order to be proud about it or for his own enjoyment. Any extra money he receives goes in the temple treasury for public use. The prohibition only forbids the king from increasing his own wealth in his own treasury, as it says, and he shall not increase wealth for himself. And if he does so, he is given lashes. When we think about Jewish justice, it is very clear that no one is above the law, not even the king. What we see clearly is that the king is given lashes for non-capital offenses. All the more so is the king held responsible and culpable for capital offenses. And those capital offenses are outlined by the Torah itself, to which the king is obligated. And in the legal system outlined by our tradition, it is the Kohen Gadol, it's the high priest who is representative of the Torah, and the separate body that determines the culpability of the king is the Sanhedrin. And so the king is subject to the power and authority of the other branches of government. It's still a monarchy, and it's a divine monarchy in the sense that it is the king who determines that it is only the descendants of Judah and King David that sit on the throne. And it is a divine monarchy in the sense that the king and the high priest understand that the Torah, which is their governing constitution, represents the divine will. But even within this divinely mandated system of monarchy, the monarch is not the ultimate authority. Even the monarch, and all the more so those who do not sit on a throne as a monarch, are subject to the laws of the land as expressed by the Constitution and as understood and interpreted by the legislature.